You could talk to some people who say all that matters in a game is the gameplay. It's a game, it's not a movie. And then of course we would dissent to that opinion with various reasons as to why other things matter. And then I guess just a discussion about what matters, how much it matters to us, and things like that. Because there's just so much there with talking about environments, music. It's a huge thing.
Well, I mean, that is a big thing because when we talk about chess, right? I have 0 interest in chess. I think that there are a lot of people that are gonna argue that chess has a very, strong foundation in that gameplay. It's been around forever, so I'm not gonna say it stacks up against modern video games, but certainly, gaming removed from video, it has a long history. It has done very well for itself. It has gone through different ups and downs and generally maintained its, audience over, what, hundreds of years.
We might be at thousands at this point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, as far as, like, being mainstream and global, I think a lot of people would argue the gameplay aspects are good, and yet I have 0 interest in it. As a matter of fact, I'll watch something like Queen's Gambit, which I thought was a great show, um, and it makes me want chess to be more interesting than it is to me, because it just isn't interesting. It doesn't hold my attention the way that other games that are similarly strategic can, just because of whatever style or flavor or colorful backdrop they put that gameplay to.
Yeah, it has almost no aesthetic appeal whatsoever. It's not trying to, right? It's supposed to be clean and clear. And there's no animations, there's no music, there's no sound effects. You don't want there to be because you're focused and thinking. But yeah, I know as a kid, I was introduced to chess around the same time that I was introduced to Fire Emblem. And I started playing one of those much, much more and committed to it. And I've played almost every game in the Fire Emblem series. And of course, I've also played chess. But if you ask me which one has brought me more enjoyment, it's very clearly the one with flashy animations and characters I can enjoy and talk to and think about.
I think that's a good comparison too, because both of them rely on aesthetic terms and references, I guess aesthetic references to feudal or medieval combat, right? The kings and queens and knights. But when Fire Emblem says this is a knight, there's also a character, there's a story, and there's art, there's color, there's showing you how this looks different from a normal knight or what tropes it does adhere to. Do they have armor? Do they have a helmet on? Are they riding a horse? Are they on foot? They're still using similar terms, and yet chess lacks any sort of visual representation.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many decisions you can make in a Fire Emblem game playthrough that are purely for your own personal decision. They don't hold any strategic weight. Whereas if you decide to deliver checkmate with a knight in chess, it's probably because you could do it in less moves or because you couldn't do it without the knight. You didn't really make a decision. You didn't say, I appreciate this knight and I am going to give him the ability to deliver checkmate. What you said was, oh, there's checkmate. I found it. I win the game. And you're not thinking about your pieces. You're not concerned about your pieces. The whole idea of a pawn sacrifice, queen sacrifice, these are all calculated, strategic things. They are not, I don't care about my queen, I will throw her away. As far as I understand, there is no psychology in how you treat your pieces in chess.
I'm absolutely that kind of a gamer where I want to attribute certain things. And I do that with the queen. I always attribute this power to it beyond just its moveset, importance of its weight on the board. And I remember when I learned the rule that you could get a queen, it was defeating. I didn't like it. It lessened the impact of that initial piece. And yeah, you're talking about Fire Emblem games having the ability to say that you are not just a passive participant, or that the aesthetic itself is a passive participant, but that there can be interaction between you as the player and the aesthetic. There can be interaction beyond your goal of winning, but also a flair of how you would like to win, and what that looks like and how it can look differently, person to person. Whereas chess is call and response. There is a leader, and you choose the strategy that best can get you that win. There are so many opportunities in more complex and visual mediums like video games to allow you to take those decisions and make them personal and still have a viability with them and still have, um, I don't know, a story and a uniqueness and an aesthetic that can't come across.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see this in video games, yeah, with our character choices in games like Overwatch, as well as in our class choices in Hearthstone or our deck archetype choices. We actually also have it in board games. Some of the board games we love, Twilight Imperium, Terra Mystica, where we can choose our faction and play of a certain style that is, as far as we understand, fairly even in terms of winning and losing. But the style, the way that you win and lose is much more personal, and we can make those decisions. So going back to video games in general,
Mhm.
um, establishing this importance of aesthetic to both of us, what would you say is the most important aesthetic for you in a game? I would offer aesthetics being music, character, identity, and voice. The various environments, like the outdoors, what you can explore, what you can touch, how much you can
Mhm.
touch it, and therefore, I guess physics as well, animations.
For me, I think that the most important thing is like a pillar for me in gaming is storytelling. If we talk about Overwatch, a game that I've sunk, 1,000 hours into, I wasn't playing Team Fortress when Overwatch came out. When Overwatch was announced, what pulled me in wasn't the fact that it was, these maps and the lanes and the competitive format and the potential for what became the Overwatch League. What interested me was Reaper as a character. I remember seeing him and his character design. I was just like, what the hell is this in this kind of sci-fi realm? So he's got these little cyborg elements. He's got like a little bit of like the Grim Reaper meets Darth Vader kind of shit going on, which just made me ask questions. And then Overwatch, being the well-designed and well-supported game that it is, had those answers. It had entire comic series of answers and short stories about these characters. It had tons of in-game dialogue and other ways to express that a game that genuinely doesn't have a story. It doesn't have a story mode. That's not how you interact with the game. It's just characters and objective points and competing. They still built so much around it, and that's what pulled me in was those things that were telling me a story indirectly, not by telling me that there was a story, but by showing me characters.
Yeah, I recall actually at BlizzCon 2015, as we were kind of gearing up to get so much further into this game than we thought we would. I remember you saying something along the lines of, look at this Lucio guy. Look at this. What is this?" Because we'd already seen so many characters from the game, and Lucio, yeah, he's so different. And then as you look through and you kind of think about and compare, contrast, and then also the characters they were announcing at that BlizzCon, you see so much more diversity pulls you in. And actually, I was going to talk about that for my side of things, the uniqueness, because I enjoyed the stories from Overwatch. I enjoyed the comics. I certainly enjoyed the short films they did. I find that for me, the aesthetic component that pulled me into Overwatch so head over heels. And again, I'm from a similar background. I would absolutely have identified as a console gamer, a Nintendo gamer before Overwatch. I'd played some games on PC sparingly, few and far between, and certainly had not played a PC shooter. Coming into Overwatch, what I really appreciated, the aesthetic that pulled me in, was the feel of each character and how unique they were. Not only seeing my friends and other players be able to get so much more out of characters that I couldn't, and to see that feel from a Genji or a Tracer, that these really high skill cap characters that I couldn't handle, and I could watch my friends play them and be absolutely blown away. Obviously, Hanzo is a great example. What you could do on Hanzo, what I could do on Hanzo, are worlds apart, and to watch that was wonderful to me. So that part of that aesthetic, not necessarily the winning and the losing, just doing anything on the character that I can't do, is wonderful. And then to be able to do that for myself as well, to tell my own story, so to speak, to go in with Reinhardt or Winston and do something that you guys don't do uh, game to game, or aren't even maybe able to do at all because you haven't learned the trick or the technique yet. You haven't practiced it. And I love that feeling. And I think for me, one of the aesthetics, one of the components of a game that I really enjoy is high quality physics, being able to really feel something. And when Wrecking Ball was released, I didn't realize how much I needed Wrecking Ball in that game, or in any game. I would play any game where Wrecking Ball was the game, um, because of how fun it feels just to control that character. And so I think that for me, it is the uniqueness of the control, and what I can do with that really pulls me in. So is your final answer still story is more valuable than physics, or if I converted you to my side?
No, we have not. I like what physics does in service to story.
Do you think our preferences about video games say anything about us as people?
I don't know. If we narrow it down to just you and me, we could probably say some stuff, but
Yeah.
I don't think we're getting any further than horoscope levels. So
People really value those horoscopes.
yeah, they really do. Actually, let's talk about that. I didn't think I was going to talk about that. Let's talk about horoscopes for a minute.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I want to talk about horoscopes because you and I have bumped heads about this in the past, right?
I think so, yeah.
So if I were to come up to you, right, and I were to casually cast doubt on the efficacy of a vaccine, you would immediately, I would hope most people, have a little like alert that goes off saying, hey, there's something wrong here. This person is doubting commonly understood science. And we understand that to be damaging and threatening not only to the individual, but to society. And if somebody were to come up to me or come up to you and casually make a comment doubting the roundness of the earth, suggesting that it might be flatter than scientists are saying, the same thing would happen. We would have concerns. We would worry about how the education system has let this person down, how difficult it could be to communicate a theory antithetical to their current position because they would get too defensive about it or maybe not have the structures to be able to engage in that conversation. We would worry about who else they're speaking to, how large that group of people who are fundamentally anti-science because of that belief. We would have a lot of concerns about it. A little alert would go off in our brains. And so when I hear someone talk about horoscope, that's what happens. I have this little alert that says this person is talking about, as if it is factual, how the constellations impact somebody's personality. And the reason that it's not just something that I can brush off or fully ignore is because there is something innately anti-science about it. Allowing any major theory to circulate without criticism that flies in the face of the current understanding of the scientific community, it has to be damaging. I would really like to find statistics of seeing what sort of superstitions like that go hand in hand with other anti-scientific beliefs. What is the crossover between anti-vaxxers and horoscope people? I'm not saying that there's a direct line, but you cannot invite into your ideology something so anti-science and not expect there to be repercussions or questions elsewhere about what should be believed or what shouldn't. And so it's not that I don't want people to have fun or know what their goddamn Hogwarts house is. That's not what this is. And again, my name is Warlock. That is, it comes from World of Warcraft class. It's a uh totally that like self-identifier fun colorful thing that a lot of people are approaching horoscope from. The issue is that I know that that is something I chose. It is something from a fictional universe, and it does not fly in the face of science. Whereas horoscope very often is people interpret it as an inevitability determined by birth, not by your own decisions or your own personalities, and many other layers that again push it into this damaging anti-science space.
I mean, when you put it that way, yeah, it sounds terrible. And I don't think there's an easy defense for this, and I know that I'm in this debate in the position of defending horoscopes. It is a challenge right now under the weight of science. I think that in my personal life, my viewpoint has been it's not hurting anybody, and if people are enjoying themselves talking about it, if it gives them something to talk about, if it gives them a way to socialize, to kind of unlock like you said, maybe some self-fulfilling prophecy perceptions of themselves and others, but one might say just plainly their perceptions of themselves and others help them to filter out some of the noise and try to make sense of something. Then it could serve a positive purpose. And additionally, maybe maybe this is silly, but just as you categorize people in different ways, not that I'm in any way condoning categorizing people, because I do not. But if it's helping people who do categorize people and use that as some sort of aid crutch in their social interactions, perhaps again we could say that that is a positive thing if they're able to categorize people and use that to create positivity. Unfortunately for this debate, that is what I have in the defense of horoscopes. Other than that, I can't see me disagreeing with you any further. And honestly, again, that is when I'm on the spot, someone's talking to me about horoscopes, they're engage we're engaged in conversation, and I'm not shooting them down, and I am not telling them that what they believe is stupid or wrong. Even if maybe I feel that way, I'm laughing, I'm talking, I'm being sociable, and I'm not shooting them down. But again, when we return to my brain when I'm alone brain, the one that understands science and is not trying to deny it in any way, yeah, I don't think that horoscopes are doing us much good. And the way you present the potential danger, that gateway into unscientific thinking, now makes me fearful.
Well, and that's always been my approach with it. Because you and I, again, I've said that we've had conflict about this in the past, and it's been very specifically somebody who is not looking for an argument, is not opening themselves to critique about their lifestyle or their beliefs, says that some comment about horoscopes, and then I go in on it when clearly it's not invited. In many instances, I would argue that that's a wrong thing to do. If somebody has a belief that is more ideological and less anti-science, what right do I have to go and create conflict in their life? For example, if somebody says they really like the new Star Wars, that's something I actually would do, right? I don't like the new Star Wars. And if somebody says they like the new Star Wars, I'm not willing, unless they ask my opinion, to tell them that I didn't like it, or to tell them my laundry list of critiques, because they didn't invite that. I'm not going to. I know how sometimes it can feel when somebody critiques something that you like, that it can make you feel bad or question your own enjoyment of it, and then you lose that thing that you used to appreciate. I don't want to do that. I don't want to take any of that shit out on other people. That's something that there is like a level of consent with disagreement. However, I don't think that applies to when the damage of not saying it can be greater. And that applies to something like horoscopes because of the way I perceive it, which is anti-science. I know that a lot of people either are aware of science and then also have this other little box where horoscope is, and that they don't interact. I know that far more than that, there are people who just don't think about the interactions of science and their appreciation of horoscope, who don't have any means of tracking how much influence pseudoscience and superstition have on their actual beliefs. That's something that we're seeing as a huge issue right now. There's not a lot of information and a whole lot of disinformation about the vaccine rollout for the COVID vaccines right now. From very basic information about which ones require multiple shots and which ones don't, and how long is our transmission periods, and how long is the recovery, and when can we open up our states. And when we have something like that that is foundationally antithetical to our understanding of science and the world and the natural order, to so casually and without conversation just have that floating around society, posted in the back of newspapers, a normal thing to bring up to a stranger, creates problems.
Impenetrable wall you're putting up here. I don't know how to attack it. I wish I did. I absolutely agree with all of the problems that horoscopes create that you're laying out, and I can't attack those individually. But obviously, the thing as a whole is pseudoscience, so I can't attack, and I can't defend that. Yeah, that sounds like a slippery slope to all of the isms that I do call people out on, racism, sexism, heteronormativity, all of those things that if I hear them, I immediately am jumping on people, even in the public space, even when I'm trying to be friendly, trying to get along, I'm still not going to abide those things. And with horoscopes or with religion, I let them slide past. I say, well, I am not going to shake this person of this belief, so there's no reason for me to try. And since they are not using it as a weapon to damage people, I will let this go. And that is, I suppose, the difference for me. And the way you're laying it out, it all sounds too similar, and I don't like it. Yeah, I don't view, obviously in the past, religion has certainly been used as a sword rather than a shield, and I want that to change. And if people are using it that way, and they're demonizing groups of people because of their lack of religion or their perceived lack of I don't know, sanctity based on their life choices and their sexuality or whatever it is, then of course I'm going to come to the defense of those groups that are being attacked by religious people. So going back to horoscopes, I guess I at no point viewed horoscopes as being used like a sword against any group, and therefore there's no reason for me to put up that bulwark. And I therefore abide people speaking about, my horoscope and what it tells them about me. And I probably am guilty of allowing that to affect my perceptions of myself because of how often people have told me things, qualities that I should possess as my zodiac symbol would suggest I would have. So going along the theme of perceiving things about people, pointing them out, putting them in categories, putting them in boxes, something I wanted to talk about here today is giving and receiving compliments. And specifically, I guess the base question would be, do you do that? Do you give compliments?
Yeah, that's actually a really good segue, because that's what I was talking about with I feel very uncomfortable when I correct somebody. We've had this conversation about whatever things might come up where somebody does something incorrectly, and we have some trepidation or some imposed social code about like how do we go about correcting that person and letting know something's off. How do we do that? And yeah, the idea of essentially bringing conflict to somebody without consent. And compliments fall into that category very often for me. There are things where, like, if you and I are hanging out, we know each other well. I have no trepidation about complimenting you because I know what you're comfortable hearing. I know what I'm able to say and won't be misinterpreted, or I know that I'll have the time to clarify myself. I don't know how they're going to take it, what their history is. Of course, there's the whole other element of um, gender issues in America. I come off as a cis man to most of the people who see me. Like, if you don't know me, you won't really get any indication otherwise. So, especially female streamers, I have no idea if my compliment is going to go out as a compliment or if it's going as an unwanted advance or if it is harassment or if it is reminding them of previous experiences that they have statistically likely had. There are so many layers to it where it gets so difficult that I've actually put both compliments and a handful of other interactions in this box of it's just not worth it.
Compliment giving and receiving it is quite a hurdle, and not worth is definitely something that I've come around to. Not to go back to horoscopes too much, but with the conflict and the consent, with that idea of when someone's being racist or sexist, het norm, etc., I will correct them without hesitation. I will say, hey, you can't say that. You can't do that. Oh my gosh, did you just say that? Can you, please don't, those sorts of things. Then you talked about grammar and those smaller things that are not going to be damaging other people necessarily for perpetuating them. But I also don't want people that I spend time with that that know me personally. And so this wouldn't be a stranger. If a stranger makes a grammatical mistake or says the wrong word in place of another, a malapropism, I'm not going to say, hey, you used the wrong word there. But if it's a friend, if it's someone like you, and you use a word incorrectly, I might say, oh, hey, by the way, that's wrong. And something we've talked about in the past where you're like, hey, correcting me there was, not helpful, that kind of stuff. But in general, my goal is because I want you to feel confident that you are communicating effectively, because in general, 99.9% of the time, you are communicating exquisitely. And I want you to continue to feel confident in that. And if there's an issue, address that issue, that 0.01% where you're having a miscommunication, to shore that up and keep you on the right track, on the up and up. And so that it's a personal thing for me, like you were saying about giving compliments to me, because you know me, I feel the same way about something like correcting someone's grammar. Yes, I'm bringing you conflict. Yes, I'm challenging you, and maybe even interrupting you, maybe just being flat out rude. But the goal, the interior of my rudeness, is the altruism that is, I want you to better yourself, and this might be a place where maybe I could help you with that. Somebody's walking around in a hat that's a reference to a video game or something. They've got a Triforce on their cap. I might be like, hey, nice hat. But the purpose of that is not to say that their hat is cool, or that I like their hat, or that I'd wear their hat, or that they should wear their hat. The purpose is actually not a compliment whatsoever. It's a vehicle to mention that, hey, you like The Legend of Zelda, and I know what it is because I'm looking at your hat, which is just a triangle with some triangles in it, and I'm able to extrapolate that that's The Legend of Zelda, proving that I have experienced it as well. And now I'm acknowledging our shared experience so that we could maybe talk about that. I really wasn't complimenting them in the first place. The hat looks stupid. I personally don't wear hats, and it's a weird color, but I was just opening the door for conversation about The Legend of Zelda. The hat sucks. So, and how and why we give compliments, I think, it's so convoluted. I mean, that's just one version of a compliment is in no way a compliment. One of the conventions, therefore, for giving compliments for me is the classic return the compliment. When you graciously receive a compliment, then you give one. And I have had this circumstance come up many times where I'm looking at someone and I'm thinking, wow, I really like the way they did their hair up today. Or I really like that shirt. I would wear that. That's a really cool shirt. There's a super cool top. Snake print. Wow, that's awesome. I have a book with snake motifs in it, and I'd love to represent with a snake print, at a book reading. That is awesome. Looks like they have scales. But then there's the whole layers of getting through what we're talking about, wading through the swamp that is actually giving them a compliment on that I am going to be locked down in. If that same person with the cool hair or the cool shirt comes up to me and says, hey, I like your hair or your shirt, it is convention for me to return and say, I like yours. And in this case, I have something to say. I actually was thinking of something beforehand, but I was so not going to actually say anything out loud. And then additionally, now there is this hollowness to my compliment that would have been genuine if I was ever going to have said it, which is now I'm just returning the compliment. I'm not really complimenting them. And I'm in a mental prison at that point. I'm saying thank you. I am bowing deeply, and I am backing away slowly out of the nearest door.
Something I'd like to talk about next time is anxiety and mental health. But I do understand that. I do understand where you're coming from. Yeah, and it there's nothing wrong with a compliment, but when you have as many people as we do who don't know what a compliment is and what sexual harassment is, and when you have so many people who have been on the receiving end of said sexual harassment, and when you have so many people who identify as something other than what they're presenting as, and you just can't understand people that well, the truth is that there are no shortcuts to making connections with people. We've talked about games.
Yeah.
We've talked about anti-science, and we've talked about compliments.
Yeah.
I think if we bundle those all together, what we get is competitive speed-running relationships. We have to ruin our relationships as quickly as possible. Go out, find somebody you like, and fuck it all up in under 30 seconds. Get on the leaderboards. I want to see numbers.